Hey Guardians, now what you're seeing here is a Master Nightfall whilst under the recommended power level, and we can just run around melting everything with buffed out abilities and weapon damage while having other benefits to the build, like infinite healing effects, getting instant health on grenade kills, infinite abilities, supers within about 30 seconds, and a lot more. Now Solar 3.0 a few seasons back dominated endgame PvE with Warlocks using classy restoration, but with the build we have set up the way it is, you're going to make up for that lost health regen using a few things, which will make the endgame PvE process a lot easier. And with a few tweaks to the build, which I'll mention in the video later, we'll be able to run this thing in Grandmaster Nightfalls, which is just going to make life a whole lot better. So guys, my name is Divide, and this is your freshly updated Warlock Fusion build. Be sure to leave a rating on the video as it really does help me out. Perhaps subscribe and let me know what builds you're currently running below. And now let's cause some Fusion chaos. Now guys, firstly as always, before we get started, if you like this one and you want to see more like this, then you can find that full playlist of new and updated builds down below, as I create them every week here on the channel, and you guys might just find your new best build in there, as that playlist is now filling up pretty quickly, with this being the 7th build video to the series. But with this build, it is your classic Warlock's Fusion Grenade build, where you can literally melt everything in the game just using your grenades. This is by far the best Warlock build in the game, other than my last Void one, since you don't even have to use DPS weapons. All you need to do is shoot enemies, throw grenades, shoot enemies, and repeat if you want to. Now the background gameplay will be a mixture of a Martial Arts sector, Nightfall and story mission to show how you'd use the build in these sort of activities. I'd say the only downside to this build is using it in activities where you have restrictions against getting health regen, like the attrition modifier in a Martial Arts sector. So to counter this, we'll be using two things that will give us health and health regen, and that's not going to be restoration either. So a quick example of how you use this build and what you'll get from using it is you'll run in and place down an empowering rift. You'll then throw a grenade to get a kill which will spawn 2 solar elemental wells, and then picking up those wells will give you health regen and make you charge with light. You'll then throw more rifts down for increased weapon damage, use your grenade to kill adds, which will give you that rift back again, give you health, and spawn more wells. From here you'll just loop the same thing, killing adds, killing champions and bosses, and all sorts. Now you take this into an activity like a Master Nightfall whilst underpowered, you're going to play it pretty much the same way but more careful, and when it comes to doing champion damage or boss damage, you'll be using your grenade as your primary source of DPS and shooting them to recharge the grenade for as long as the rift is around. In some cases you might need to just back away from the rift if you have a lot of incoming splash damage, or you will end up dying. But this build is going to melt everything pretty quickly anyway, so you really shouldn't have too many issues. Now with this build there's going to be a few different setups we're using with the new seasonal mods, and depending on how you play, whether that's solo or with a team, it will depend on what that setup will be. But I will go over a few things you want to use and the alternatives in case you don't have certain mods unlocked. So starting with the exotics, we're going to be using the Starfire Protocol. This is a must have for this build to work properly, but alternatives to use for the time being while you work on getting that, if you haven't got one, are going to be Phoenix Protocol, Mantle of Battle Harmony, and an Alchemy. Now Phoenix Protocol, this will give you super energy on kills while standing in your well, which is great for getting faster supers, as an alternative to using double ashes to asset mods and a Starfire Protocol. Battle Harmony, same again, great for faster supers, although you're required to use solar weapons. And then the Alchemy. This is great for having longer, if not infinite rifts, which means you could just have a healing rift and stay in that rift for the whole time. Now of course, if you're using Starfire, then you'll want to make sure you're running an empowering rift, but if you're using anything else like the ones I've mentioned, then run a healing rift. The weapons will depend on the mods you're running for the activity that you're playing, so if for example you're using a new artifact mod here, you'd run solar weapons, but we'll get to that shortly. So now let's go through the full setup of the build, starting with the subclass, which is going to be the Warlock Solar Dawnblade subclass with the Well of Radiance super. You're going to get this super insanely fast if you have this build set up the way I do with Starfire, so just make sure you have an empowering rift on. This will increase your weapon's damage, but it will also work with our exotic armor Starfire Protocol, because fusion grenades will have an additional charge and recharge from empowered weapon damage, that being our rift or super ability, which is why you want to use the empowering one. And then fusion grenade kills will recharge the rift, so you just loop between the two abilities. Get a fusion grenade kill for the rift, and use that rift to deal DPS to enemies to recharge that grenade. So it's perfect for both ad clearing and bosses. You can use weapons that deal damage over time like a Thorn, a Witherhoard or an Anarchy too, because standing in your rift with that passive damage over time, it will start recharging your grenade as well. But back to the subclass before I get lost, just make sure you have an empowering rift on when using Starfire Protocol, as well as a fusion grenade, because this is what the build is focused around. For the melee though, I'm using just the Incinerator Snap, but you can really use whatever you want. Then the aspects are going to be Touch of Flame. This will make our fusion grenade stronger by exploding twice, and since we have 2, that's 4 explosions, which is enough to kill a master champion at level on its own. So you can just place down a rift, then throw 2 grenades to kill them, which will give you the rift straight back and repeat. The second aspect is Icarus Dash, usually a PvP aspect, but I generally like using it anyway for the dash, so you don't have to use this one. Then the fragments we have are going to be Ember of Blistering, defeating targets with solar ignitions grants grenade energy. Ember of Char, your solar ignition spreads Scorch to affected targets. We also get a +10 to the discipline stat with that. Then Ember of Ashes, so that we can apply more Scorch stacks to targets. And then lastly Ember of Eruption, so our solar ignitions have an increased area of effect with a +10 to strength. So overall these fragments are really going to help with those ignitions and make ad clearing much better when ads are near those enemies affected. Moving to the mods, and I will start in the helmet as usual, then go down. So we have Well of Life, where picking up a solar elemental well will give us increased regeneration for a short period of time. This is great for just getting extra health regen. I know it's nothing compared to restoration, but it's better than nothing. We also have double ashes to assets for super energy on grenade kills. We're using 2 of these, and these things are no joke because these will get your super back in just like 20 seconds, if not quicker, if you have a load of ads around to get kills with your grenades. It's actually better than Phoenix Protocol, so 100% put these on. Now for the arms, we have Elemental Ordnance to spawn in solar wells on grenade kills, again a must have so that we can get those wells. If you don't have this, then your alternative is going to be an Explosive Well Maker, or an Elemental Armaments using solar weapons. Other than that, you want Fastball for the faster grenade throw, and then your champion mod that you need. For the chest, we have Heal Thyself, so that when Charge of Light and getting a grenade final blow, you'll get health back, which is around about half. I did try using 2 of these mods, but I just didn't feel like it was worth it in my opinion. But alongside that, throw on your 2 damage resist mods. Then in the legs, we're using Elemental Charge so that we become Charge Light when picking up the solar wells, which we'll use on Heal Thyself. A bit already to start health regen when picking up orbs, and then our Scavenger mod for a heavy weapon. Lastly though, for the class, you can either run a Seeking Well so that wells come to you, or a Bountiful Wells to spawn an extra well on each grenade kill. Both are just as good and worth using with this build, but depends on your preference. So for me, I like the wells to come to me as I'm lazy, and I don't have to move away from my rift as much. So for that, I'm going to use Seeking Wells. Now the next mod, if playing in a team, you want to use this one here so that dealing damage with solar weapons will increase our abilities damage. And then same again with the abilities increasing our weapons damage. If you're using this, make sure you're running solar weapons. Otherwise, if you're using the build solo, I'd recommend using the solar operative mod, as this buffs everything including our abilities by 15%, which is just perfect, and you always want to use solar op when playing solo. Now the last thing here I want to go over is your alternatives for elemental charge. You can replace this with any Charge Light mod that will make you Charge Light, like using a Taken Charge and then a Harmonic Siphon mod in the helmet with a solar weapon. But this would be a last resort because ideally you want Elemental Charge. And if you haven't got Heal Thyself, I'll temporarily replace it with Font of Might for increased damage. But either way, the only things you really need with this build are these subclass aspects and fragments and all that stuff, which everybody can get anyway without grinding, and then a Starfire Protocol. So until you can get all the mods for this current build, that's all you really need for the build to work with the ability chain between your rift and grenade. So it doesn't rely heavily on having mods, but it will make the build a lot better if you can use them. Now the last thing you want is to make sure you have 100 resilience so you can get the 40% damage reduction, and then I tend to go for discipline and recovery as my 2 other stats to max out, so that I have that passive cooldown with my rift and grenade for the times when I mess up accidentally by missing a throw or wasting a rift. But either way, this build is going to dominate in endgame PvE if you can use it the way the build should be used, and it's definitely worth trying, so make sure you put this thing on and set it up. The dim link is below. So guys, that there is your newly updated Warlock Fusion DPS build in Destiny 2 Witch Queen Season of the Seraph. Next, as always, be sure to check out the full playlist of new and updated builds down below, as I do cover them pretty much every week here on the channel, and you might just find your new favourite build. But for now guys, thanks for tuning in, have a good one, and I'll catch you all very soon for the next build video.